Jeremy, the Texans made an interesting contract adjustment after they got Diggs in the building. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, so Dan, they basically took his 3 years of mostly non-guaranteed money on his contract. They ripped it all up. They put it all into this year. As you can see there, that included $3.5 million in guarantees. He was due next year. I checked in on this with a source. They said the Texans basically decided to do him a solid. They know that he wanted this with the freedom to get into free agency as 2025. And we talked about it off air. This helps them with their cap space. They can certainly knock things down, put some void years on the contract, gives Houston some flexibility to that. And it's really a Keenan Allen situation with Chicago. Now you have a player who's in his 30s, still maybe has a little bit of prime years left, but it doesn't have a lot of time, and so you give it a year, see how it goes. You can always franchise tag him or you can extend him onto a new contract, but they did him a solid here. And
the Texans have the ability to bring on a big contract because they have the quarterback on the rookie deal, and obviously a big advantage cap-wise for them. Mina, how do you see Diggs fitting into that Houston offense?
Extremely well. And he's going to have to, by the way, to make this deal worth it for them after the adjustment they made to his contract. But yeah, from just strictly a football perspective, he's a phenomenal fit. So complimentary to the receivers who are already on the roster. Nico Collins is your true number one, your big-bodied ex-receiver who can win downfield. Tank Dell, coming back from injury, is talented speedster, deep threat, inside-outside versatility, and in Diggs you have now the route runner extraordinaire who can win underneath and at the intermediate level. So I love what it does for the passing attack. I also love what it does for a run game that was frankly terrible last year. The Texans offense was 10th in EPA per play throwing the ball, 30th running. Now, there's a number of reasons for that. Injuries on the offensive line certainly factor into it from a run blocking perspective. But they faced the 6th highest rate of stacked boxes in the NFL last season. They did run also a lot on early downs. But you're not going to face that level of stacked boxes regardless of your run-pass balance with these 3 receivers on the field. I can tell you that. I would be very surprised. And if they do, C.J. Stroud will throw it all over the yard. So really, really love what this does for the offense in the short term. And it is just the short term, now we've learned, because of the contract adjustment.
Extremely short, only a 1-year deal. And Jeremy framed it as doing them a solid. It's certainly doing Stefon Diggs quite a solid, maybe an unprecedented solid when you look at NFL contracts. This is really not something teams do with 4 years left to go on an extension, which Stefon Diggs had before the Texans went ahead and did this. They moved up $3 million from the future into this year. They gave him $20 million of what he was owed this year as a signing bonus up front. And this is a really unique and very curious situation, because if you're the Texans, the only reason you would do this would be if you felt like you had to keep Stefon Diggs motivated for 2024. But if you have to keep Stefon Diggs motivated in this way for 2024, is it really worth sending a second-round pick to get him when you might only have him for 1 year with no ability to get a comp pick in return? Just a unique set of circumstances for the Houston Texans.
Yeah, Texans obviously all in for this year as they build around C.J. Stroud. But the Bills, I want to flip it around to them. Diggs is not the first departure from Buffalo this offseason. They lost Gabe Davis in free agency as well, some guys on the defensive side of the ball. So, Bill, when you look at Buffalo, 4-time defending division champion who expects to win every year, where do they go from here with the draft coming up in a little less than 3 weeks?
They have to evolve their roster construction now that Josh Allen is significantly more expensive than he was earlier in his career. Remember, when they traded for Stefon Diggs, Josh Allen was still on his rookie deal. And oh, by the way, the Texans just acquired C.J. Stroud. Perhaps C.J. Stroud has Stefon Diggs on a rookie deal as well. So from the Bills' perspective, they need to add help at receiver. They could trade up for somebody, but I think it makes more sense to trade down. This is one of the deepest drafts for any receiving core we've seen in several years now. Josh Allen, of course, is going to be a guy who spreads the ball around. We saw that in the offense in the second half of the season. They could run the ball more. We talked yesterday about them using 12 personnel more often with Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. They have a really wide range of things they can do. But I look at the Packers, a team that has no first-round picks at receiver. They traded away Devontae Adams. They have 3 second-round picks at receiver, a third-rounder, a fourth-rounder, a fifth-rounder. They've managed to piece together an excellent receiving core without having that number one guy, that traditional receiver. The Chiefs have Travis Kelce, but they really did not go out and get a Tyreek Hill replacement, and they've done just fine. Yeah. So could be maybe a bit of a zigging when everybody's zagging, right? Go out and trade your number one receiver and maybe replace him with quantity over quality.
Yeah, I think it depends for Buffalo on how they regard this class, how they regard the players who are potentially available to them at 28 versus the receivers at the top and the bottom. And I say that because I don't think there's an obvious, one-size-fits-all approach to this, regardless of the players in terms of like trading down, even though, as Bill, I think, correctly put, this is a very deep class, and there are examples in recent years of teams like the Packers, notably, who have found really good wide receivers later in the draft. The thing for me, though, with this particular class is I view it as having a very clear top three. You see them right there: Harrison Jr., Neighbors, and Odunze. I think those three players are worth trading up for. If I'm Buffalo, I pick up the phone, I call maybe Chicago, maybe even Tennessee. I pick 7, although they're probably going to take an offensive lineman. And I say, what would it take to get Rome Odunze? Now, based on recent precedent, and actually a pretty similar trade would be the Bills trading down with Kansas City for the Patrick Mahomes trade, where they went from 27 to 10. They would probably have to give up a first-round pick. I just think Odunze is worth that. I think his floor is so high, he comes in and immediately gives you the sort of production you need to continue contending. But if you can't get Odunze, I would not trade up. So to be clear, this is very player dependent for me. And if you can't, I would see if A.D. Mitchell is still there at 28, I would consider sticking. Otherwise, I would, to take Bill's point, think about trading down.